right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Issue 17. We're going to be doing an OKR teardown looking at launching a user-generated campaign, more often referred to as UGC. So looking at what would be one of our portfolio companies' first UGC campaign and how we get into that. Sitting here with my main man, Kay Lou. How are you, sir? Sunny
I'm
day in
doing well.
BK.
Excited to be. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. The weather's been a lot colder as of late, and I love it. It's not like the typical humid 90-degree weather. It's more like in the 70s, so it's just comfortable all day.
Fall is in the air. Love it. All right. So UGC, man, this is a trippy one. So in terms of, and we're like maybe 2/3 through the sprint. This is a key result, obviously, of an objective. And so typically let's start there. So usually as kind of a point of departure, we lay out what the full OKR is just to set the context. So the
Hmm.
objective for us is distribute blog content on social and test video to improve new visitor website sessions above 330 a week. So in sum, we made a huge commitment towards content and I guess testing that as a kind of SEO as a useful channel for us. We're obviously also testing an ambassador program. And the hope here is to get more leverage from the effort and the energy that's going into content production as a function of distribution. So it's like, hey, we're writing a blog post. Let's turn it into a bunch of social posts. Hey, we're doing a webinar. Let's turn that into a bunch of snippets, etc. And again, here the hope is the operating leverage comes from the distribution. In terms of key results, we've got a 4 with this objective. We've got finalized content themes and add internal links to historical posts to improve SEO. This is basically kind of pulling through the final stages of a clustering strategy. So we've got our beats or our themes. I call them beats, kind of like, journalists have beats. Cops walk beats. So I'm like, all right, we got our beats, our content beats, boom, 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 boom. And then how do we get thoughtful about a pillar piece of content for that, which is basically like a beefy table of contents piece that then links to the chapter, so to speak, of the book. And all the search engines like it because they can index it and they can scrape it real quick. So that
Yep.
piece is there. And then, of course, translating and sharing 100% of our new blog content on our primary social channels within 48 hours of publishing. This is much more of like a system or a rhythm where it's like, hey, something hits the wire on the blog page, boom, we got to translate that into social and I guess wrapping some metrics around what that means, and then
Allow me
distributing
to
10. Yeah,
allow me
jump
to
in.
interject really quick. Are we sharing our screens with the visitors?
We're not. We're gonna probably move a little bit away from keeping the shared screen rolling the whole time because it
Mm,
sets up being a little bit funky. But
yeah.
what we could do, I think, unless it's like a truly visual aid. So when we step in, like if we're showing charts, we're showing graphs, we're showing dashboards, etc., we'll share screens. But I think for the majority, we just gonna be chatting.
Okay.
'Cause we have,
Sounds
and that's
good.
a function of just direction. I guess I should say to the viewers, the listeners out there, that we got top graded. We're working with Riverside as our kind of back end platform for recording, and we leveled up that way. I got myself a pseudo pro microphone, so we're trying to evolve and iterate. I think we've been at it for a little while now. We're trying to level up our game across the board. So I think this should be exciting. But we'll probably index away from screen sharing unless we got some real substance to share that it is a visual aid. But good
Yep.
call though. This is like the textbook. Like, hey, yo, by the way, I can't see your screen. You're about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like 10
I hear
minutes
lots
into
of
a demo.
information, but I can't
Yeah,
see anything.
yeah, no doubt. Well, and here, let's we can pull this up real quick. So here's a quick look at the OKR in totality. Well, that's spinning up. So we've got our objective here, which is again what it is, key results, and then kind of rounding it around with distribute 10 key webinars, content snippets across our social channels, and then successfully launch our first ambassador UGC campaign, aiming for a minimum of 20 content submissions. So boom. So that's where we're at, and we're gonna dig in hard to the UGC campaign component of the key result. That's what we're gonna be chatting about today. Cool.
Perfect.
Beauty. So let's jump in. So out of the gate, user generated content. What the hell does, like, I think before we really dive in, let's establish some definitions. Like, let's establish common ground around what we're talking
Hmm.
about. And then also, I guess, all working towards a worldview around what UGC means. Should it be a priority? How does it fit into the content game, which is ultimately fitting into an acquisition game? What do you think about UGC?
Yeah, so I'm personally a fan of UGC. when you think about it as a whole, anyone's marketing strategy for their company is usually empowered once you get your own users to start posting content on your behalf. It's free, it's easy, it's someone else literally saying everything that they love about your product, and now you get to use that to market and generate new customers. So it's always a win-win all around, in my opinion.
You know, it's interesting. Like I was trying to think of like, is UGC just marketing now?
I, it's part of the strategy.
Like,
Because
is
guess
it?
what? With marketing, you have to reach your users. What's the best way to reach your users beyond enabling them to produce content for you?
And we've completely democratized content creation, access to channels. Whereas
Hmm.
before it was like, hey, Pepsi Cola is going to invest in billboards, they're going to invest in commercials because that's how they can reach their consumers.
Yep.
Nowadays, it's like, let's let our users tell their story. They're already telling the story, right?
Yep.
Like we're all our own reality TV show at this stage. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that like like brand marketing, product marketing, all that stuff, like to me it's like I think you just put your user in the middle and give them the platform to tell their story and some lightweight guardrails, which we'll get into, and let it rip. Like I saw a moment that touched me. There was this Jeep commercial which was just this mashup of like all these people globally doing crazy shit in a Jeep, right? So they're like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm in Hawaii driving up this crazy thing. We're at the top now. You
Yep.
know, they're crying tears of joy. It's like we're navigating through like a volcano. Cool. We're in this like crazy snowy ski
Yep.
terrain. And it's like great because the alternative is, like, do you want to live an adventurous life driving a Jeep? And it's like it's like Matt McConaughey like driving the thing. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we just don't trust what brands say. So it's like, users are going to speak about the products they love anyway. It's just more about creating a channel and again wrapping parameters around that for consistency.
Another engaging example of that is a video that went viral. If you have a G-Wagon and you're a G-Wagon owner, the money wave where you just throw like a whole wad of cash, and then the other guy comes, he's like, hold on, hold on, hold on. There's a G-Wagon owner coming. Whew, just throws a wad of cash in front of like that's the kind of user-generated content you want, where it kind of pushes the envelope, engages you, gives you something to laugh about, and you're like, huh, if I wasn't thinking about buying a G-Wagon, now I am.
So
You know what I mean? But that it only works well in B2C niches. Once you get outside of that with B2B and B2B2C, now you're hitting a layer of security where it's do we want all of our users talking about how they use the platform? You might get into a hairy rut there.
or there's sensitivity issues because I think ideally, it's like we're trying to sell G wagons. How do you drive a G wagon? Can we follow you around, whipping your G wagon around for a couple days? Like you're going to tell a better
Yeah.
story than we could ever make up, right? Like you can't make up most of what are the most interesting stories in history. Um,
Yeah.
so, anywho, all right. So I think, and again, as I'm kind of stepping into this, it's like, wow, UGC is synonymous now, I think, with modern marketing, period. Like, I think there's
Yeah.
obviously a
I
brand
mean, look at
marketing.
the Yeah, I was gonna say, look at the proliferation of affiliate marketing. It's really just user-generated content, and now they're saying, "Hey, you like talking about us? Here's an incentive. Just
So,
keep telling more people."
exactly. So that becomes the game, right? It's like, how do we create, it's an enablement and an incentive thing. And you can gamify that stuff, et cetera. But I think that's where I'd hope for us to point most of our mental energy is accepting
Yeah.
that UGC is the name of the game. Yes, we can produce a lot of stuff in to kind of complement that, mostly around thought leadership, around the category, around our users, around the challenges they face. And I think another good kind
Hmm.
of North Star for me on the content side was, you know, answer the questions that no one's answered in your category. And that's
Hmm.
the guiding light, right? Like just continue to push the envelope around what are the most modern challenges, et cetera, and you can kind of stay ahead that way. So
Yeah.
I figure we do our best to answer the questions that no one else has, and then we do our best to give our users a microphone. At minimum, at best, incentivize the shit out of them and show them what great looks like. Anyway,
You
a lot of
you
action
touch
there.
on a very you touch on a very interesting point there. Usually in sales, they say don't say too much because you don't want to answer the unasked question. But in marketing, it's almost the opposite. You want to answer the unasked question because that's how you get them.
Or,
That's
yeah, or
interesting.
I guess you don't want to provoke unasked questions in a sales process because then it's just like,
Right.
right, because that's a rabbit hole and it's like, hey, oh, by the way, have you thought about this? And it's like, oh, actually, we haven't thought about data security. And it's like, oh, shit. And the solutions consultant's like,
Yep.
oh, no, here we go. Like, hey, we'll send you our SOC 2 documents and, have a nice day. But anywho,
Yeah.
so I think let's substantiate our point of view with some trends and some data points. So, and
Hmm.
I hate to do this because some of these stats are like, what the hell? But just a few that are interesting. 63% of consumers are more likely to purchase a product featured in user-generated content. That's from Stacklaw. UGC generates 2.5x more engagement on average over branded content. That's from Adweek. That's a pretty trusted resource. Video
Hmm.
UGC results in 4x higher views. So 4x better views, 2.5x better engagement. Customers exposed to UGC convert 5.2x more than those not exposed. That's from BigCommerce. So some of these are a little fuzzy, but
Yeah.
and then the most fuzzy, 52% of marketers say UGC is an effective way to increase brand awareness. As much as I care about what fake marketers out in the world are thinking, let alone right down the middle half, like a
Yeah.
majority by 2%. But anywho, I think we can all kind of say UGC is very interesting. So I think to put it simply, based on these data points, UGC outperforms branded content on every dimension. If we're just thinking
Period.
about engagement, if we're thinking about viewership, if we're thinking about click-through rates, if we're thinking about conversions, et cetera. So ideally, this needs to probably be contemplated in your strategy and something that you have in your toolkit. Cool. So now on the same page, this is what UGC means. This is why it's compelling. This is kind of the state of the world we're living in and how it looks and feels. Some general approaches to UGC. So to zoom out just a little bit. And I thought this was very interesting that there's really kind of four elements to weigh the approaches around, right? And we like scorecards. We like to
Hmm.
think about, okay, how we're going to go about this. What does good execution look like? What are the kind of the elements that we should factor as we make a decision here? First one is quality versus quantity. Second one is diversity. Third is cost. And fourth is speed. Those are pretty good. So keep those in the back of your mind. And let's just talk about kind of some general approaches and think about how we might score them in a quick sense. So brand ambassadors, you're already lit up. You're already engaged with what we're doing. We're incentivizing. You already have an incentive for users that convert. Quality versus quantity. Is that a quality indexing towards quality on that one versus quantity? Where do you think?
In that scenario for the brand ambassadors, I'd probably want to index towards quantity.
Okay. Well, I think as a function of choosing the ambassadors, we've kind of
Hmm.
we've limited our pool, so to speak, right? So it's like, hey, we're going to
Right.
fixate our energy on like 10 folks who are. So I think we're kind of contained because I think that's ultimately like the decision points. And if we just zoom out and kind of cut to the chase, right? It's like, hey, should we find 10 people who we trust, who we know the shit out of the product and are huge advocates,
Yep.
and and that's kind of like let's go harder towards quality. The diversity of perspective might be lower. Like it's more likely that they're kind of brand evangelists, super loyalists. They're, I guess, just on one dimension. They're a little
Right.
bit more tech literate, perhaps. Cost very low. I guess the compensation in that sense is an upside. It's kind of a success fee where you're giving them direction to generate content, to touch their network, to create and incentivize trial conversions and new users. So they're getting paid on the back end. That's where that cost is embedded. And speed is probably
Yep.
pretty quick because as a function of only 10 people, that's 10 humans that you need to pull in any kind of given direction, which is a shitload easier than 20, 30, 40, 50. So that's one option,
Right.
right? Another option could be, I mean, this was a fun one that we were bullshitting about, but it's like, we have about like a most wanted content clips list. Right.
Yeah.
And I love this where it's like there's a bounty on these clips, and it's like we want you to do how you capture leads and nurture them and convert them into paying clients, some kind of thing, right? And they're like,
Yeah.
cool, this
Yeah.
is
How do you
what
invoice your clients? Yeah.
beautiful. And how do you make sure you never miss, you get paid on time, right? Like what are the tactics
Right.
for invoicing that serve that kind of outcome? And just putting putting it in a publicly listed thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
we don't care who you are, if you knock this down, we'll pay you a fee for the content, and then trying to gamify it or introduce a little bit of kind of, natural law where it's like, and then there's an upvoting thing. And if yours is the most upvoted, you get a bonus. So it's like, hey, we'll pay you $25
Yeah.
per, Instagram reel of you doing a screen share demo, kind of basically essentially like a product demo or a testimonial. and then we'll create the conditions for people to upvote it or downvote it, and you win, you get a 5x whatever the fee is. So you'll pay you $200, or whatever. And I
Yeah.
love that one, but that's an example of like, could be tons of quantity, tons of
Yeah.
diversity. The cost goes up a little bit. Speed is a little bit tough to predict. So I'll just kind of pause. Like,
Right.
those are kind of the poles, I think, on
And
the
then
spectrum.
with that second approach, there's a little bit of brain damage because someone has to sift through all of that and decide what's quality, what's not. And here's where I stand. With both approaches, I love both because they lean on the side of quantity. You're going to get a ton of submissions. Quality, I would argue, is within our control to some extent because it's a function of how well you enable others to produce that content. So, did you give them templates? Examples. Did you walk them through the full story of the company? It's like, hey, do you understand the mission here? Great, cool. We need something that looks like this.
Totally.
Go out and do it. So if they paid attention, we have something of quality coming back that matches this example. What we need is quantity. So that's why my brain kept going to, okay, ambassadors, if we do the bounty, we're going to get a lot of quality if we're going to get a lot of quantity if we show them how to put together one quality piece with an example.
And that's, you speak of the devil. Like, I think that's kind of the smooth transition, is like establishing standards. And I still need to find that song for it, but it's like, na na na, gotta na na, na na na. So I guess the third thing, or I guess if you kind of, so on either side, like, one is go really hard after your most loyal kind of brand evangelists. And the assumption there is they know the product the best, they're the most loyal, they're the most embedded, etc. And we'll leave it at that. The other side is like, put this shit out to anybody under the sun. If you have a pulse and you're a user, this is what we're looking for. And then you probably need to be super thoughtful about what those incentives look like. So that's the spectrum. And then there's a bunch of stuff like something in the middle, which is kind of interesting, is to actually pursue a subset of users based on their followership. So it's like, actually, we don't care how long you've been a user. We don't care what your usage looks like. We don't even really care if you understand what the product does and how to communicate it to
What's
the market.
your reach?
You have a shitload of Instagram followers. And that's just thinking about operating leverage in different ways. But that's on the
No, that's clever.
Cool. So now, just steering the ship right towards the Holy Land here. We've got establishing parameters and direction to ensure quality. Because I think no matter what, and this is a weird thing too, like that I think of often with like webinars and stuff, where it's the magic is in creating lanes or guardrails that are just enough to allow for kind of spontaneity and creativity and
I
like
agree.
organic cool shit. If you restrict it too much, then it ends up like a scripted thing, and there's a very low, like there's no G6 money flopping. I can tell you that much. It's like
No.
you lose a lot of what, I think if you look at the attributes of like viral content, that stuff's not super guardraily.
Yeah, no, it's whatever happens in that moment. You capture the moment, and that's what makes it go viral. So, to your point, Pareto principle, you give them 80% guardrails, the other 20%, have at it. You're the expert now.
Or you might even invert that. It's like, right? So with power law, right? It's like you just want to give them the 20% guardrails that are the most impactful, and then let them rip the rest.
Yeah.
I guess that's always kind of the mission, right? Is like you sniff out that 20% relentlessly. Here's some ideas. These are just some headlines that I'll kind of rattle off, and then I think we can talk about which ones we think matter the most. Develop clear content guidelines and goals. That's like, no shit. So that's a little bit broad, but I think goals is interesting. Share examples of ideal content. And I think with art and creativity, contrast is always a very useful thing, especially for those that aren't like technically trained in arts, right? So for like, my mom, she's an interior designer. Like we'll walk into a place and I'm like, man, that lamp looks weird. And she's like, yes, it's because it's out of scale. Like it's not proportionally correct for this room. And I'm like, ooh, like that's dope, Mom. You just gave me kind of a vocabulary around that. But the easiest way to do it is like walk into a well-designed room and it's like, oh my God, this is great. And then walk into a not well-designed room and it's like, this is terrible. And it's like, and I can't describe what makes one better or the other, but I can tell you that contrast is very useful. So being able to give something to model after is always you kind of establish a standard and then you manage towards that standard, and it has to be documented. And in this case, it has to be visual. So share examples of ideal content. Next one would be Give prompt ideas or templates. Last one, or the next one, highlight product features to emphasize. Next would be suggest interactive or multimedia approaches. Offer rewards and incentives, and provide a submission review process. These are, you guessed it, ChatGPT special shortlist.
Yep.
So, you know, I think let's stack rank these. I mean, some are too general, but I think we both agree on like
Yeah.
sharing example. I think setting a goal, right? It's like, hey, this is what we're trying to do, right? Like we want to ideally and that could be volume based. We're trying to touch the market with this volume of content, and the hope is to create this volume of traffic or this this metric of awareness. But ultimately, it's to grow the business and to probably learn more about our users. So I think we both agree that you, of course, have to begin with the end in mind. What's the goal here that we're working against? Fair?
Agreed. Yes.
And I think some
Man.
examples of ideal content, and I think you can reach in from, and to your point, like UGC, there isn't a ton with B2B, and that's what gets me jazzed, dude. Because
That compliance, because you never know. Compliance is such a gray area to operate within. You never know what's truly secure versus what's not. What's a risk versus what's not. So it's like unless you have someone that's owning and trying to mitigate risk internally at your company, for B2B, it's just hard because anything can be a lawsuit.
well, I guess it's just simple where it's like, oh, here's like a worst case scenario, but it's like, hey, here, this is a demo of me doing my thing,
Sure.
and this is my client, and oh shit, there's their credit card number.
Yeah.
And it's like,
There's our client name, and they told us not to tell anyone who we're working with. Like,
and it's
yeah,
like, brutal.
yeah, you want to be
So it's
careful.
mostly about sensitive information, et cetera. But when I look at it, it's like, even sharing examples of ideal content, it's very hard. Like for us, imagine if you're like, yo, this is how I use HubSpot, CRM. I'm on my phone right now. Like I could pitch some, I was pitching data, whatever, what's that shit called? Data box.
Data box.
I was hanging
Yeah.
with this dude who runs an outsourced bench, like accounting bookkeeping agency, and I was like, QuickBooks with DataBox is very legit because QuickBooks is like the most conventional spine for any kind of accounting work stream. And then I was like, but the analytics
Yep.
suck, and it sucks because they realize that this entire ecosystem of analytics providers is now bolted onto their shit, so it makes no sense for
Yep.
them to develop any capability there. But I'm like, ooh, DataBox, beautiful, and I'm showing him the thing. And I'm like, I don't really care if you see our P&L or whatever. Like, we're public as it gets. So anywho, I
Yeah.
don't want to take us down a trap, but I'm like,
No, I
B2B
had that
UGCs.
same train of thought. I had that same
Interesting.
train of thought with Nate this morning. He was looking to switch from QuickBooks to another payroll system. We went through the product comparison, signed into my Wave system. Now he's a believer in Wave.
Yeah, there you go.
You gotta see it. You gotta
Yeah.
see it.
And analytics is what it's all about. I mean, anyway, I guess with that kind of stuff. But okay, so share examples of
Absolutely.
ideal content. I think this is where it gets interesting in B2B too, because you can I think this is where you can it's about a prompt to try and spark creativity and then get out of the way.
Yep.
And I think you can be like, hey, here's some kind of interesting shit that's happening in software in a consumer basis. What do you think?
Whew.
So anywho, I don't know.
That's why giving prompt ideas and templates that's what stood out for me, because as a technical person, if you come to me with no other instruction and you say, here's an example, I want that, get me that, I know exactly the steps I need to take to get you exactly that. So if we're talking about force ranking, what stood out to me the most is give prompt ideas and templates. Seeing is believing. If we know Honeybook does this, cool, we want to mimic exactly that. All of our users generate content exactly like that.
Cool. So we got a couple minutes here. We can go ahead and wrap up. The other, I think I think probably the next most important is a submission review process, ideally.
Yes.
And there's two things that are kind of interesting because there's UGC in the sense of like, hey, talk about our company on your own channels. And we can't really edit that. We can't audit that, right?
You can't, yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of internet as the great democratizer, right? Say whatever you want. Yo, scaling ventures is whack. And they, ship that to wherever they want. It's like, hey, we can't control that. We can't censor that. Like that's the voice of the consumer. And that's been a huge breakthrough in our reality in terms of holding brands accountable, quality of service,
Yep.
all that other shit, right? So we can kind of leave that. But when it comes to, hey, but I think it's an important distinction that there are kind of two flavors. There's you speak about our thing and distribute it on your channels, and go baby go, and we can try to give you as much enablement and guardrails to your point to ensure consistency, et cetera, but that goes that way. When it comes to them producing stuff that hits our channels, there has to be a submission process or some kind of feedback loop where it's like, hey, this is,
100%.
and then you come back to the standards and the guidelines, right? Here are the rules of
Yeah.
the game. The thing you put in broke this rule. You need to make a change or we can't ship it. And that's just a best practice really in any walk of life.
Yeah, because brand representation matters, and the wrong person posting the wrong thing representing your brand could actually lose your money like instantly. On top of that, there's a proliferation of tools today where it's like you can't stop people from saying bad things, but you can monitor your brand representation online. So if someone says something bad, it'll alert you, and you can at least go reply and say, "Hey, sorry that happened.
Yeah.
We would love to, give you an incentive to improve your experience." It's like that's what you really want to
Or
get
it's
to.
like we're
But
human
yes.
and we fucked up. We're sorry, and I think, and that's where you back to our principles, it's like build in public, be a human.
Yep.
We're all just trying to do the best we can. And when things go south, you just take accountability and move on.
Yep.
All right, my G, user generate. And I'm starting to think more now about just like UGC in the B2B domain and getting crystal clear on what are the hurdles of UGC in a B2B environment. And then how, because obviously a problem well defined is half solved. So, all right, I'm going to make another little turn. I'm going to, add a little bit of sauce to this thing before we ship it on Saturday. But that's
Okay.
an interesting, I think, kind of sub element of what we're trying to achieve here. In closing, anything to add?
No, I think this was all pretty solid. I think leaning more into the UGC is definitely going to be a game changer for our portfolio company. So excited to spank this out of the water.
Radical. All right, my friend, go get him the rest of the day. I'll catch you later. Peace.
For the love of the game.
No doubt. Giddy up.